Hi, I'm Kathryn.
And I'm Theresa.
And we are the co-authors of the book, Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. We're here to talk about all things student empowerment in music education. Before we introduce today's guest, we want to remind you to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
In addition, if you like what you hear today, please consider leaving a rating or review. That's what helps podcasts like Pass the Baton grow. Mm-hmm. It was really nice to meet Ryan today.
I know. I felt really lucky that we had a class together last semester, and kind of listening to him with the early stages of this project, and then now to hear what's actually come of it is pretty special.
Yeah, the Orpheus project, or the Orpheus. What is it called? Like the
Orpheus approach or method.
Approach, yeah. Was new to me, but it was really cool to listen to, and really kind of exciting for an ensemble.
Well, and I love that everything he mentioned is very approachable. You know, yes, it's a very different way of thinking about an ensemble, but the way that he lays it out, anyone could try it.
Yep.
Okay, welcome back. We are joined this week by yet another awesome guest. We are excited to have Ryan Diefenderfer here. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm excited because I think you might be our first Arizona guest. Does that sound right, Kathryn?
Could be.
Yeah, and you know, living here in Arizona now, it's kind of cool. So, we're happy to have you. So maybe to start off, could you introduce yourself? Give us a little bit about your background, what you're up to these days in music ed.
Yeah, of course. I'm a music educator in northern Phoenix, Arizona. I'm originally, however, from the northern suburbs of Chicago, a suburb called Mundelein. In the north suburbs, we're known for having the Great Flag Six Flags Great America nearby. I attended Mundelein High School, which had a really large band program of about 300 students. I had excellent band directors, an excellent middle school director, an amazing private lesson teacher. I think like a lot of band students, I started playing trombone in the 5th grade, and I was lucky enough to have a 6th grade jazz ensemble, and that really got me into playing. But otherwise, I was kind of a typical type A band student. I played in all the things: the marching band, the concert band, and pit orchestra. I joined Midwest Young Artists, which was like a youth jazz ensemble. I participated in the Merit School of Music downtown in their trombone studio. After high school, I ended up going to Indiana University in Bloomington. I got involved in some composition there. I mention that because I think amongst all the other stuff in college, I think I was looking for a voice, and I think that gave me a voice. And so I think that relates to some of what I'm looking for when I'm teaching. I'm trying to give students a unique voice if they're looking for one. I taught at Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp for a couple of years in college, life-changing. Student taught in large school in Indianapolis at Carmel High School. But then after I graduated, I was looking for something different. So I wanted to leave the Midwest if it made sense to. And it happened that I had two really good college friends. One was in my trombone studio who were already teaching in Arizona. So that brought me out here. I applied for a job out here and I got it. And that's still the job that I'm in right now at Paradise Valley High School. So that was back in 2014. This is my 9th year of teaching here. When I took the job, it was teaching middle school band orchestra in addition to the high school. But over time, phase that out, just because if there are any traveling teachers listening, it's a very tough gig and very hectic. And you always feel like you're not giving enough to both things. So just the last few years, I've been here alone, where I teach marching band, concert band. I teach the orchestra program, all the chamber music stuff. And then we have a 0-hour jazz ensemble course that meets every day as well.
Wow, that's still a lot of things.
It is. So imagine doing that plus middle school band and orchestra. And so that's why just at a certain point, everyone, and it was during 2020, it was during the pandemic where you're kind of reevaluating how much you want to be doing at a time. And so that was when I pulled back a little bit and said, I'm just going to do high school.
Nice.
Just that.
Just high school. And wait, isn't there this other thing that you're doing too, like grad school?
Yes. So I'm about a year and a half into doing my master's at Arizona State University. I'm about halfway done now. Yeah.
Woohoo. Yeah.
I'm doing that part-time alongside teaching full-time. So shout out to anybody who has lived that life as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I did. And it's a lot, but you can do it.
Yeah. I find it's really a nice organic way to just fuse it all together, because if I learn something, the very next day I can put it into practice. And I love that.
Yeah, that's fun. Well, I know today we're going to talk a little bit, or I guess center things around the Orpheus approach and kind of your interest in that. Could you just maybe start with what is that? And
yes. So the Orpheus approach is it's directly inspired by the New York-based professional Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. They were founded in 1972. So they're celebrating 50 years of existence at this point. But they're a conductorless orchestra. So that means that members of the ensemble make all the decisions, including planning what repertoire to play, how to rehearse, who's going to lead each rehearsal, who becomes a member of the ensemble, and more. So a lot of those traditional roles that a conductor would play amongst in the organization, it's shared by the members of the organization. So I became first aware of just the Orpheus ensemble in general in 2014 when I attended a Midwest clinic presentation. It was by Dr. Scott Jones from Ohio State University, and he was presenting on implementing Orpheus conductorless rehearsals in his groups at Ohio State. So I had never heard of Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. I know a lot of musicians, professional ones, are aware of Orpheus though, but for me, it was my first time being presented with them. I just remember from that presentation seeing the ensemble members would stand up and give feedback to one another in a rehearsal setting. And then Dr. Jones talked about how he witnessed just independent musicianship growing like crazy, and how the candor of feedback just improved over time. And so I was hooked. I was like, and this is my first year of teaching. I was at Midwest, and I was like, this is it. I love this. And so from that point, I experimented with the Orpheus method pretty much right away. But it was more like once or twice per year. I found it was great for observations because like it's very Socratic seminar, and then teachers will walk, or administrators walked in and they're like, wow, the students are interacting with each other at such a high level, and that they might not be doing in some of their other classes. But it really, for many years, it was just 1 or 2 times a year that I implemented it kind of to mix things up. But then it was last semester during a master's class I was taking at Arizona State University. I came across an article that discussed the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. So it came back into my consciousness. From there, our professor, Dr. Evan Tobias, he pushed us to think about ways we could implement things we had learned during, it was a course on student-centered learning and project-based learning. He asked us to think about ways we could incorporate what we learned immediately, or like a kind of a long-term plan. So I thought, why not implement the Orpheus method for an entire concert cycle, and allow that to be like in the form of an entire unit.
That's awesome. That's very, very different than like anything else that you had mentioned as far as, teaching concert band and jazz. I guess jazz is a little bit, more interactive, but did it feel weird even thinking about it at first?
I think because that presentation at Midwest was so persuasive and organic, and it just seemed like the students had so much buy-in that I was in. And I think even in my first years of teaching, in my first iterations, it went well. Like the students responded well. They thought it was different. And because they're so used to sitting and listening, that even the opportunity to speak and use all that stuff they know, I think resonated with them. And then, so taking it to the next level, I talked with my student leaders in December about, hey, I think we're gonna try this. And they asked some questions, but they were on board. They said, sure, sounds like a cool experiment.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. So, you talked to them in December. What happened next and what did it look like?
Yeah. So I introduced it to my leaders back in December. And then on the first day of classes coming back, the first week of January, I introduced it to all the students. I talked about what the Orpheus method was. I talked about why I thought it would be worth it to implement it for one concert. And this was one of the coolest things was, I think a few days after that, somebody told me the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra is coming to Scottsdale and they're playing a concert at Scottsdale Center for the Performing Arts this month in January. So I think it was just so serendipitous that we took the students, we got to see a Q&A and their dress rehearsal and their performance of it. And so I think that just tied it all together and got us started with it. But what it looked like was over winter break, I chose a slow piece for each group, knowing that it would probably be easier for them to learn how to use an Orpheus style rehearsal with a slower tempo piece, just because there aren't drastic tempo changes that a conductor would need to help navigate. And more time for them to just listen and process the music and hear things they might want to fix rather than a fast technical piece that would be pretty challenging. So I passed the music out. I didn't conduct the sight read because they knew ahead of time, this is our Orpheus piece. So Mr. D, they call me Mr. D, isn't going to be giving us musical feedback that he wants us to fix. So I think that first rehearsal, I just said, would you like a metronome or no? And we would like to count us off. And that was it. And I said, well, I'll just see you at the end of the piece. And then let's see, as we got into the rehearsal process of it, I kept the window for what they were able to do in their rehearsal really narrow. So I said, you have 20 minutes, and I set a timer. And I said, here's the measure numbers you should rehearse today, and you should focus on 2 things. And I just put a list on the board: rhythm, articulation, intonation, phrasing, note accuracy, etc. And then I had them vote on things to focus on, and they chose to. And then they did. In our rehearsals, just like what I saw at that Ohio State clinic, only one person could stand at a time. So they took turns speaking by standing up. And they were really good about that. They give the floor to the person who was standing. And sometimes you had that little awkward, like 2 people stand and then they're like, oh, just kidding. And those are the best moments where we just had authentic, fun times. As we continued on, I started to ask them which measures they wanted to rehearse instead of me telling them. And then pretty organically, we just opened up to like, you can rehearse anything that you hear, because the students felt pretty limited by the 2 to 3 things at a certain point. They're like, can we just do anything that we hear? And I was like, yes, we are ready to just open the box up for you to give feedback on whatever you hear. We also found that throughout the rehearsal process that jobs were pretty important. So we had a job to time the rehearsal, so everyone kept on track. And that was one thing that the students noticed when we saw the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra in their dress rehearsal. There was a timer who said, time's up. And it was actually union related. Like the union person was like, we were done with rehearsal, but we took that. The students said, we should do that. We should have a timer for the rehearsal. They noticed that in the Orpheus dress rehearsal that there were audience members from the Orpheus sitting on the audience. So we implemented that. And we had 2 to 3 people usually per class volunteer to sit out in the audience and listen. Wow. What else? We had somebody operate a metronome. That was a popular job, especially for underclassmen. They just loved being like, yes, I have the control of, they sat at the front of the class and they had my harmony director and they just hit basically on and off, but they felt empowered, I think, by that, because they're like, I get to decide when the metronome goes on. So I think that was cool. And then the other big job we passed around was the person who either counted us in or took the breath, led the breath in for the ensemble. And we rotated those jobs every day. And if it was ever too samey, I said, we need new people today to take these jobs. And it was always like, that allowed, I think, the underclassmen then to jump in and say, yeah, I can do those jobs. So.
Yeah. Everything I hear, I love the idea that you wanted to try this. And then I think what people think sometimes is when we try these things, it's like, you just have to say, go. And you didn't, right? I mean, you chose a piece because you knew like that would be important to me, that I set them up for success, and I think a slow piece will work. I think this piece will work. And, like this gradual release of like, you had the scaffolding, but then when they were like, can we just, and they were ready, it was like, sure, and then to the point of like, hey, I think we should have jobs. I think we should do this. I think we should do that. And like that it's just really cool to hear your process.
Yeah, I think I was really impressed and happy with how organically things developed. So at my school, we have like a band and an orchestra council that are democratically elected each year of 5 members each. And so I started to just ask them in our weekly meetings at lunch, how do you think the Orpheus is going? And what would you like to see different? And so I got a lot of feedback just through these generative dialogues with them. Mm-hmm. That was where, what did we come up with? One of my violinists said, hey, I noticed the Orpheus ensemble in their concert, they were rotating seats. And so we started to do that as well, so that, our stronger members who often in our rehearsals are sitting at the front, and the less experienced people are in the back, which is typical for most groups. We rotated that. And so the stronger members were often at the back, propelling their sound forward. And that's even in our Q&A with the Orpheus, their cellist mentioned that. He said that in our group, we feel that everyone's playing evenly because we're rotating around and not just having the principal players in the front. So that was cool. And that just developed because we had conversations every week. We also came up with ideas to mix it up, like, only underclassmen can speak today. So all upperclassmen, you're not allowed to, you can take notes, but you're not allowed to stand up and say anything. And so that brought some just difference and energy to each Orpheus rehearsal to make it different than the last one.
Yeah. And I think the fact that you were able to see them perform and experience that Q&A, that must have been such a powerful element to all of that.
Yeah, it was an unplanned, but perfect part of it, is because I think that it made it real for them in like, this was the second or third week of the semester. So, before we had really dug our heels into the Orpheus, it made it very real and very applicable. And they saw it in action, and they saw, the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra is amazing. They sound as good as the best professional orchestras that are conductor led. And their program was imaginative, and it was like brand new arrangements of stuff like pictures at an exhibition. It was so cool. So because I saw that, yes, I agreed. Like, it just made it so real for them.
Yeah. So eventually you got to the point, you put it on stage, right? You were able to do a performance. What was that like?
It was very rewarding. We took it to a concert festival. And so both my orchestra and concert band groups took it to the festival. I chose a student who I thought would be a good narrator. And it just happened again, organically. He was hanging around practicing, and I know he has a good voice. So I said, hey, would you like to narrate this or introduce the Orpheus process to the audience and to the adjudicators? And he said, I would love to. And then I gave him a script. I checked the script with the students, and I said, what do you think of this script that we read to the audience? And they said, yeah, it looks great. And then, so he read it, and I guess I mentioned him because the clinician who came in when we went to the concert festival complimented that student and said, you brought in this perfectly. Like, the narration was perfect. And so that was cool because all the students applauded for him, and he felt great, I'm sure. But it was well received by the adjudicators. I believe they praised that we were doing it and that it was different, and that one in particular, John Gomez, who I love and look up to a lot, he complimented the students and said, like, you should be really proud that you created this on your own without your teacher telling you what to do. So that was really cool. And then at our concert here at home, I put like a little blurb in the program about the Orpheus method, and some of the parents had come to chaperone the Orpheus trip. So for them, I think it was cool because it was full circle for them. Yeah. And then they also were like, this was cool. This was a neat thing that, I don't think some of the parents got the full value of it because they weren't seeing it every single day, but I think a lot of them understood that this was different, and it was very student centered. So I think that was rewarding. For the students, for the parents, for me.
Yeah. I know you mentioned earlier that you had done this and like it was nice for observations because when an admin walks in, they see students doing things. I guess to be explicit, like, two things. Like, first of all, like I think some of us say, oh, I can't veer from what I do because I have these standards and I have, to be observed and all these things. And yet you chose something like this to have your admin come and see. So what is it that the kids are doing? What's the learner experience that's different that admin or others? I mean, and you said students, it was student centered. Like, what do you see when the kids are doing these kinds of, or when they have their Orpheus time?
Yeah, I think it's really good for administrators and everyone to see students having high candor dialogue with each other that's focused on goals. And so a lot of times when we get observed, they see, feedback from the teacher to the students, but seeing feedback from student to student, it's like, I guess for some administrators, it might look like tutoring, but tutoring at a large scale, and they're all working towards one thing. So it's sort of like a Socratic seminar, but it has like a direction to it. So I think it's probably kind of unique for administrators to see like, wow, they're working on this together, and the teacher is guiding it, but not in control. And so, for my first several observations, I incorporated it for a little bit because we have a block schedule here. So I was like, I don't want to just teach 86 minutes and have it, one shade. I want to incorporate some different shades to this lesson.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the Danielson framework is what I get observed with. And that's all about like, peer-to-peer feedback and students creating their own assessments and criteria. And I feel like that's all that right there.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome.
Because they're truly the ones making the music.
Yeah.
Right. That you're putting it in their hands to really be musicians. And I think that's an element that it's easy to miss when it's especially an ensemble that is heavily director led. So, yeah. What do the kids think?
A lot of things. I love giving Google form, like summative feedback. So I have some of that. But overall, I was impressed right away with, I think I might have said about how the students embraced the concept pretty quickly. And maybe that was partially because we attended that Orpheus performance. So they were really, there wasn't resistance for using the method at all. It was just, we're doing it and we're going. Some of the things from the written student feedback, they said that they liked that they had a voice. Again, something that maybe they don't always get in the conductor-led rehearsal. Yeah. They felt like they had the ability to say what they wanted, although some acknowledged that they were too shy to really say a whole lot. I love that many of them felt like they had a student voice, however, during this process, even though some of them felt like they used it more than others. One student used the word immersive to have, especially at the beginning when they said we're focusing just on like articulation and dynamics, and that's all you can do. And they used the word immersive because they were the ones trying to fix these aspects. I think overall they really liked having the flexibility and opportunity to come up with their own interpretation, because oftentimes it's just us as music teachers saying we should do this, or in this recording they do this, so let's do this. And so because they had a hand in that creative part of it, I think a lot of them liked it. But in their feedback, the words that came up a lot, just the most, were freedom, independence, and open-ended. So I loved that they found those things to be true. What else? I think they grew a lot as independent musicians, just because of this open-ended aspect. Like, for example, in one piece, we performed Korean Folk Rhapsody. The piece ended with double fermatas, so the students had to navigate a few entrances and releases. And so because they tried a few things with breaths, they learned through that, instead of just the conductor saying, hey, watch me at the end and we'll enter and release together. So I think that through this, they learned a lot.
Yeah. Well, everything you're saying is an example of student empowerment, right? Like all of the words, it's there. These students really had the opportunity to take ownership. Have you noticed that applied anywhere else? Like, have you seen things that they may have gained from this experience coming out anywhere else, either in your classroom or just in general with the students?
Yeah, a few things. I think a lot of the students hadn't had to listen critically to some of these things before, especially maybe freshmen and sophomores. And so they wrote about that a little bit. It was great to have to focus on something that just wasn't me and doing my thing. And they had to make it sound good as a group. What else? I think that, so we're implementing another model right now, the CCC model, which stands for Curious Collaborative Creativity, designed by Karen Collins. But when I introduced this new model that we're using, I just noticed how flexible they seem to be because we implemented this Orpheus model. So that I think is one of the biggest effects of this Orpheus thing. Just by trying something new, they seem really into like trying another new thing. So I think in the long term, for the culture of this particular school and program, I'm quite excited for if there's something else we want to try. I feel like the students are really malleable. They can say, yep, let's do it.
Yeah.
Like, you want to design our whole marching band show ourselves? Yeah, sure. Probably not that, but something along those lines, I feel like they would be down for, which is cool. And just more willingness to work as a team and do things together rather than feel just like I am this trumpet player playing in this group and I'm doing my job. But it seems to be like my job is now to do more than just that.
Yeah. That's cool.
So if people are listening right now, like what could somebody try tomorrow?
Yes. I think just as a principal, try to find some opportunities for students to solve their own musical problems, because that's one of the big things about the Orpheus is that if they ask me, hey, how do we fix this? And say, how do we fix this? Like, let's turn that back around. So I think even in a conductor-led rehearsal, you can spend a lot of time asking the students how they would fix something that isn't going correctly before you give them a solution. So for example, let's say the cello and bass section aren't playing the rhythms together. Instead of just giving them the solution, you can ask them, what do you think? What is one way we could fix this? And like, let's do that. And if they are successful in that, they're going to feel really great about that. They're going to feel rewarded because what their solution worked, rather than just the solutions that we give them. I think along those lines, something else you can try tomorrow, if you have a choice between telling students how to direct a musical phrase or letting them have the opportunity to do it, let them do it. I do that a lot with my groups here. And I remember one time a student, even like when we were going to a middle school, said that they loved that we do that. Like we love that we get to draw and interpret these phrases on our own pretty frequently. So I think if you don't really have an idea for what a phrase should do, ask the students and allow them the chance to try that out and try different things, because they're going to grow from that. And I guess I'll make a plug. If not try it tomorrow, try it next week. Try an Orpheus rehearsal. You can give the students the prompt of like, today we're going to try a rehearsal without a conductor, and we're going to work on this piece, and I think we should work on these measures. And to give feedback, stand up one at a time and give some feedback. And it's just up to everyone to use their ears to stay together and subdivide and make progress without a conductor. And then you can take some questions about it. But I think if you don't make a huge deal about it, you can go for it. When I was still teaching middle school, we implemented some Orpheus stuff at the middle school level, and it was functional. It wasn't the most progress you'd ever seen, but like it did function. So if middle schoolers can do it, I think that everyone can have a shot at it. Yeah.
One thing we've noticed in talking to people throughout the podcast is that a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, to give them the ownership and to have that student-led experience, it can't happen without some kind of a sense of community in the room. Like it just can't. And I'm sure that's no exception in your classroom. So do you have any tips or any suggestions for how you work to build that community in your music room?
Yeah, I remember my English teacher in high school, his name was Steve Jordan. He spent the first several minutes of every day just talking to students about what was going on. And then he would like flip the switch and he'd be like, okay, now we're learning about English. And I was like, and all the students loved it. And we felt like we were connected to him and each other. And so I have been doing that for a long time. Every day I just ask my students something about what's going on in their life outside of our music class. And I direct them to talk to each other, not just me, because I don't want them to just have a relationship with me. I want them to have a relationship with each other. And as soon as they get too comfortable with the person next to them, I'm like, okay, great. And now we're rotating. See, talking to somebody else. It just bugs me when students don't know everybody else in the room. Yeah. I do a lot of, I don't know if you guys have ever had table topics, but there are these great little conversation starters. I wish I had them with me, but they're out there. But there's like, I have a bunch of them and just grab one and they have random questions. And I love that because it gets them to talk about things that they're not usually going to talk about in a regular conversation, but it might be something that they're vulnerable about. And then it digs a little deeper. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with Brene Brown and all of her amazing research. Yeah. For listeners, like go check out Brene Brown stuff on vulnerability. She makes the case through research that vulnerability leads to trust. And trust, I think, leads to community. And so if the students are vulnerable with each other, then they're going to, I think, have better community. And I guess one more thing, we do a leadership camp at the beginning of every season, marching band school year. And so it's a 2-day camp that I lead, and we'll study works like the Culture Code. I don't know if you guys know that, it's by Daniel Coyle, but I'm like so into that book. And he came out with another book called The Culture Playbook recently, that kind of updates his ideas. But we study that and we coach our student leaders on how to be welcoming to new members, and how to use supportive language and positivity and to meet them where they are, not be judgmental about their prior experience or lack of prior experience. So I think some of it is from that top down, just the student leaders over my time here have gotten so much better and better and better. And they embody just good, they embody good personality and people and leadership skills.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. It reminds me a lot. Our first guest of this season was Matthew Arau, and he spoke of very similar things and using books and just getting those student leaders, like you said, to really embody everything that you want the group to be. And it works.
Yeah.
So one kind of last quick question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll try the Orpheus thing again?
Yes. So if I can talk about, so what we're doing now is the CCC model. It's collaborative creativity model that Karen Collins came up with, but it involves splitting the ensemble into 3 teams, where one team picks the music, and then another team teaches the music. But with the team that decides how to teach the music, I gave them a bunch of options and I said, you can conduct it, I can conduct it, you can use an Orpheus model. So my concert band, they came up with, we're doing a Beatles and video games concert, which we're all really into. And we're doing 6 pieces. And they said, you should conduct the 3 hardest ones. And I said, that sounds great. No problem. I probably would have pushed them in that direction anyway, just because of the score studying aspect of it. But then they picked 2 student conductors, a sophomore and a senior. Yeah. And then they decided to do another piece as an Orpheus format. So on their own, the students came up with, we want to do another Orpheus piece, without me pushing them in that direction. So I think this model, the CCC model that Karen Collins came up with, like allows for the space for the students to do that. And I guess I never mentioned it, but in their reflections, the students like overwhelmingly thought that we should utilize Orpheus throughout the entire year. It was about half and half, where half of the students thought we should do it once or twice per year. And some students thought we should do it on every concert. About half, just one piece per concert, we'll do an Orpheus. And so they decided to do that already. So
That's
we'll
awesome.
start that on Monday.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
So, this has been great, Ryan. How can people connect with you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. I have a website, but it's extremely outdated, so don't go there. Just shoot me an email. And then if you shoot me an email and want to chat, like I love chatting on the phone, or we can Zoom or whatever, but my email is diefenderfer@pvschools.net, or my personal email is rjdiefen@gmail.com. Or you can find me on Facebook. But that's pretty much it.
Very cool. Well, I hope you do get emails, because I think this is a really cool thing that people can do. And you make it sound so approachable and just so worthwhile.
It was fun. There were so many fun moments that came along the way that were just, somebody said something funny because they didn't have like the language to use it, and everyone knew what they were trying to say. But and then somebody would say, "Do you mean this?" And like, yeah, that's what I meant. So it was just like, it came up with just hearing students work through problems on their own and guiding them, I think was the most rewarding part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so nice to meet you.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
We'd also love for you to consider sharing this podcast with a friend and leaving a positive review. That's one of the best ways to get this message to new listeners.